Camden, New Jersey was first settled 3.5 centuries ago in 1638 by a Swedish colony and was first incorporated in 1828. On this vacant site adjacent to the Radio Corporation of America parking lot, the Camden Station and ferry slip of the Pennsylvania Railroad opened for service on June 23, 1901. Passengers arriving from Philadelphia by ferry could board trains, trolleys, and in later years, buses. One prominent landmark for many decades has been the RCA Tower, virtually unchanged since it was constructed. This is milepost 0.0. The first railroad in the state of New Jersey and to reach Camden was, of course, the Camden and Amboy. Planned in 1811, formally organized on January 14, 1828, and chartered on February 4, 1830, the Camden and Amboy began to lay rail that very same year at a cost of $11,000 per mile. The railroad had been developed with a threefold purpose in mind: the Jersey Shore resorts, industry, and agriculture. Soon after the Camden and Amboy came into town in September 1834, Camden began a rapid industrial growth. One such industry is the Campbell Soup Company, which has been here since 1862. Ferry service across the Delaware River between Camden and Philadelphia began in 1688 and lasted for nearly 270 years. When the Ben Franklin Bridge had been constructed and opened to the public in July 1926, the ferry began to disappear from the scene. On the evening of March 31, 1952, the Pennsylvania Railroad ferries Millville and Haddonfield closed the history books shortly after 9:00 p.m. when they made their final crossings and ceased operations. The railroad ferry service had begun here on March 5, 1836. Today, the Patco high-speed line operates passenger trains across the Ben Franklin Bridge. One can board the train as far southeast as Lindenwold, New Jersey, and within minutes be in Conrail's hometown, Philadelphia. On the evening of April 14, 1865, General Ulysses S. Grant was aboard a ferry on the Delaware River en route to his residence at 309 Wood Street in Burlington, New Jersey, to visit his children when he received a telegram advising him of President Lincoln's assassination at Ford's Theater. The following morning, he departed for Washington by private coach. The Pennsylvania Railroad took control of the Camden and Amboy on June 30, 1871 through a 999-year lease. The Pennsylvania merged with the New York Central to become the Penn Central on February 1, 1968, and on April 1, 1976, the Penn Central was one of the 6 railroads consolidated under the watchful eye of Uncle Sam as Conrail. Government stewardship terminated when Conrail became a self-sustaining industry nearly 11 years after birth. Public sale of Conrail stock opened on the New York Stock Exchange on March 27, 1987, and was $30.75 per share at the sound of the closing bell. We are looking at the remains of the so-called Chinese Wall upon which the tracks were laid at Camden Station. We are now 2.9 rail miles from the Camden Station. Pavonia at one time had a station which was designated as number 1302A. This yard once hosted units of the Pennsylvania, the Reading, and was home of the Pennsylvania Reading Seashore Lines, which was founded in 1932. The main line running north from this point is now known as the Bordentown Branch. In 1941, it was part of the New York Division and known as the Amboy Branch. Historically, the main line is the original Camden and Amboy right-of-way. The Atlantic Division tracks branched off of the main line in the vicinity of the 27th Street overpass upon which we are located, and bordered the eastern edge of Pavonia Yard, where they curved to the right away from the main line. We can see what remains of the Atlantic Division tracks. Trains heading east on the Atlantic Division would depart Pavonia on tracks that no longer exist. The trains still operate today, but they must first head north to Delaware Junction and then south to Jordan Junction, where they connect with the original Atlantic Division. Today we refer to the remains of the Atlantic Division as the Mount Holly Branch. We will visit Delaware before rejoining the Atlantic Division at Merchantville Station. The Atlantic Division is the subject of this program. We will visit the entire division and branch lines from here to the Jersey Shore, where the division joined into the New York region at Bay Head. Another program entitled Tracing the Camden and Amboy is available from Lakeside. This is Delaware Junction in Delaware. At one time, 4 towers controlled all movements through the junction. The west side was PJ Tower, later renamed Jersey. MB Tower, known as Morris or Minson, was on the north side. DY Tower, known as Delaware, was on the east side. And FS Tower, known as Fish House, was on the south side. In 1937, all interlocking equipment was consolidated and relocated to Jersey Tower, as it was elevated and offered an excellent view of the interlocking. The other 3 towers were demolished, and the junction track between Delaware and Minson was also removed. In 1986, Jersey Tower was replaced by remote control equipment and was itself demolished. The junction track, which was removed, was used by the Pennsylvania's Nellie Bly as she plied the rails between New York City and Atlantic City. We are looking south from DeRouse Avenue. The rails which cross over the main line are the former Delaware River Railroad and Bridge Company tracks. We will refer to this line as the Bridge Company line. Beyond the curve where FS Tower once stood, there are 2 turnouts on the main line. The westbound turnout runs up and to the right of the main line, routing trains across the Delaware Bridge into Philadelphia. The main line at this point stays level and continues north to Bordentown. The Bridge Company line has been upgraded and will be used by Amtrak's Gamblers Express, which will soon begin operation between Philadelphia and Atlantic City. The last passenger train to cross the Delaware River Bridge was on January 9, 1959, and consisted of just 2 cars. The eastbound turnout, located where FS Tower once was, is used for the track which runs upgrade from the main line and curves to the south. This is the connection for east and southbound movements out of Pavonia, and it is the present routing for all Mount Holly trains. All track construction for Delaware Junction was completed on May 29, 1897. Across the Delaware River, we can see the catenary towers of Amtrak's Northeast Corridor, which was originally built by the Pennsylvania Railroad. The first rails along the Northeast Corridor were laid by the Philadelphia and Trenton Railroad Company early in 1833. The Delaware Bridge was originally built by the Pennsylvania and New Jersey Railroad Company, which would later become the Delaware River Railroad and Bridge Company, and then the Pennsylvania. The first train crossed the bridge on April 19, 1896. The double-tracked rails are 50 feet above water level at high tide, the footings are 71 feet below water level, and the bridge spans 1,944 feet from shore to shore. The total cost of this project was $1,163,171. Originally, the span in the center was a swing span. It was replaced with a lift span in 1960. The tracks leading into New Jersey branch off of the Northeast Corridor at Shore Tower in Philadelphia, cross the river, and head southeast into Haddonfield, where they once connected with the Camden and Atlantic Main Line. The Camden and Atlantic would become the Pennsylvania-Reading Seashore lines in later years. On April 16, 1962, the Reading Railroad acquired operating rights over the bridge and into Pavonia Yard as their car float operation was becoming increasingly expensive. This also enabled the Reading to operate up to 6 daily trains across the bridge. Jersey Tower was located at the east end of the Delaware Bridge, which is just behind the trees at track level. We are 4.7 miles east of Camden at station number 1435 in Merchantville. Trains no longer stop here due to the track removal in Pavonia Yard, which we had previously observed. The architectural design of this station is similar to the medium-sized stations built by the Pennsylvania. Mileage references and station numbers have been taken from the 1923 and the 1945 editions of the Pennsylvania Railroad Guidebook CT 1000E. At milepost 5.2, just east of the Merchantville station, is the Atlantic Division overpass, which runs across the former Delaware River Railroad and Bridge Company track at Jordan Junction. The access track, which connects the Bridge Company line and the Mount Holly branch, lies just beyond this bridge. Furman Lumber Company is still served by rail, and this is the westernmost point on the existing Mount Holly branch, which Conrail operates. Merchantville Station lies just beyond the trees in the distance. The political boundary separating Merchantville and Pennsauken lies along the crossing in the near distance, which is Cove Road. Several years ago, this Bridge Company line coming south from the Delaware Bridge was severed and this turnout removed. The single track was originally double tracks until about 1966, when the left-hand set of twin rail was lifted. The bridge company line south of Jordan has been unused for several years, and nature quickly reclaimed the track bed. When New Jersey Transit and Amtrak combined their efforts to establish the Gamblers Express, the switch was reinstalled and new rail laid where the undergrowth had temporarily resided. It has not yet been completely ready for passenger service. The track to the left runs up and connects to the Mount Holly branch. The Atlantic Division overpass, which we viewed a moment ago, is around the bend to the right in front of the crane. We are on the east side of the Atlantic Division overpass at the upper level of Jordan Junction. Furman Lumber is on the opposite side of the bridge, just barely visible to the left. The track on the right comes up from the lower level at Jordan. The phone box was probably used to contact the dispatcher before trains move on to the bridge company line for their return trip to Pavonia. We believe the Pennsauken station, number 1436, was most likely located where the camera now sits. We have crossed from Camden County into Burlington County. 7.2 miles east of Camden, you can find station number 1437 in Maple Shade. The architectural design of this station is quite similar to many small branch line stations which the Pennsylvania Railroad had built for them. The North Church Street station in Morristown was designated as number 1440 and is located 10.4 miles east from our starting point. This building had at one time housed the Burlington County Police Academy and the Burlington County First Aid Academy. Its current owners have renovated and added on to the building so that it can serve into a second century, although not as a train station. The architectural design is quite similar to the Merchantville station. The Chester Avenue station in Morristown was 11.1 miles from Camden until 1984, when it was removed about 300 feet west from its original site. Station number 1441 has been restored and renovated and is now a dentist office. The architectural design is similar to the Maple Shade station. We will tour the railroad from the east side of Morristown to Hartford. The tracks parallel Route 537, also known as Marne Highway. Track crews laid the rails east from Camden to Mount Holly in 1867. It was known as the Camden and Burlington County Railroad, which was a subsidiary of the Camden and Amboy. During the years that this project was being researched, it was hard to imagine that the railroad was developed as a major means of transportation during the 19th century. Today, we take the automobile for granted, as the iron horse, once having faded into history, is making a strong comeback. A true appreciation of the rails can be gained by working and riding along these ribbons of steel. We are going to pass beneath Interstate 295 and then the New Jersey Turnpike. We are now 13 miles from Camden in Hartford, in Mount Laurel Township. .1 miles east of Camden in Hartford, near the intersection of Route 537 and Hartford Road, is where station number 1443 could be found. This is also my hometown. From where we used to live across the road, we could see every train as it passed by. As a small child, I wouldn't mind being put to bed every evening. From my window, I could easily observe any rail action. From here, we will follow the railroad east to Masonville and then Hainesport. In the background, we are listening to the sounds of a passenger coach riding along a section of the former Pennsylvania Railroad at about 50 miles an hour. Wouldn't it be nice to experience this again along these rails? Masonville was the site of station number 1444, just 14.4 miles out of Camden. We are now passing through Rancocas Woods. We are going to stop at the Hainesport Industrial Park for a moment. The tracks will continue for another quarter mile and then curve to the south, away from the roadway at milepost 16. Located 15.8 miles from Camden is the Hainesport Industrial Park in Rancocas. This is one of Conrail's major customers along the line. On Monday and Thursday evenings, you can sometimes observe the freight being drilled here. Barclay Haynes owned 311 acres of land along this tranquil section of the Rancocas Creek and established Hainesport for his Rancocas Steamboat Company. The steamboat line operated between Philadelphia and Hainesport via the Rancocas Creek. Transportation would become Mr. Haynes' first love. The Barclay, built in 1849 and named for its owner, plied this waterway as the first method of steam-powered transportation to this area. When the Burlington and Mount Holly Railroad entered Mount Holly the same year, the two lines became directly competitive with each other. Rails from Camden reached this point in 1867. We are now 16.9 miles east of Camden, where Hainesport Station, number 1447, once was. Mr. Haynes was very involved in the development of transportation in New Jersey, like Colonel Stevens of Camden and Amboy fame. He built steamboats and was instrumental in developing the Camden and Burlington County Railroad for the Camden and Amboy, and the Pemberton and New York Railroad for the New Jersey Southern. To the west, we see the Rancocas Creek Bridge, which we were looking at in the previous scene. We are in Mount Holly, 18.4 miles from our starting point. This is the junction of the Medford Branch, which runs to the south. The branch was originally incorporated on July 24, 1869, as the Mount Holly, Lumberton, and Medford Railroad. The 15 miles of rail were laid beginning on October 3, 1869, and train service commenced 7 weeks later. We will tour the Medford Branch and then return to Mount Holly. We are just 2 miles south of Mount Holly in Lumberton. This is the site where the annual Burlington County Farm Fair is held. Not many people who attend the farm fair are aware the trains once ran past here, let alone stopped at station number 1462. The only evidence remaining is where nature has reclaimed the roadbed. And the patch job done to cover the rails where they had crossed Route 541. Just to the south, a bridge across the Rancocas Creek still exists and is a favorite spot for fishing. Station number 1466 in Medford now serves the community as a police station. This was also the junction for the Camden and Atlantic Railroad, which came in from the west. In 1927, passenger service to Medford ended. We have returned to Mount Holly. The Medford Branch Junction is located 3/10 of a mile to the west. MH Station is located 18.7 miles east of Camden. Service between here and Pemberton began on January 1st, 1863, 4 years before rails were extended east from Camden. In 36 years of service, the Burlington County Railroad operated over 46,165 miles and carried 159,169 passengers for a total profit of $21,395. On May 21, 1869, at 10 o'clock a.m., Camden and Amboy engine number 39 exploded near the station after pulling cars loaded with marl west from Pemberton. The investigation results stated that the incident was unforeseeable and unavoidable. The ties which lie across the rails signify the present end of track. Just to the east of the station, at milepost 18.9, was the junction of the Burlington Branch, which ran 7.2 miles northwest into Burlington. Evidence of vandalism is quite apparent due to the char of the ties. The Burlington and Mount Holly Railroad and Transportation Company was incorporated on February 11, 1848, and began service on June 18, 1849. This was the first railroad to reach Mount Holly, the seat of Burlington County. We will tour this branch next. This is a view of the Burlington Branch trestle that was taken in June 1976. During the past 2 years, the trestle has been demolished. This is the same view today from atop the Atlantic Division trestle on the east side of the Mount Holly station. We are about halfway between Mount Holly and Burlington. The former track bed ran parallel to Route 541. Today, the track bed has been regraded and paved to become the southbound lanes for the Route 541 widening project, which is currently underway. The bridge pier, which remains in the Assacunk Creek in Burlington, is still more evidence that the railroad once ran through here. We are in East Burlington at MJ Block, on the site where EB Station once stood. This is where the Mount Holly Burlington branch connected with the Camden and Amboy main line. On July 22, 1895, the Pennsy added another chapter in railroad history by electrifying this branch line. Scheduled electric service between Mount Holly and Burlington began on this date and operated until late in 1901, when the Mount Holly powerhouse was destroyed by fire. This was the very first electric rail operation in the United States. All rail service along this route would be discontinued on July 23, 1925. Burlington City is rich in American history. As the capital city of the province of West Jersey in 1681, the birth of the United States was just beginning here. In February 1722, Colonel Daniel Cox wrote a proposal for the United States of America as a plan of union for the colonies. He didn't see his idea bear fruit, as he died in 1739. It wasn't until Benjamin Franklin took Cox's idea and proposed it once again in 1754 that would result in the formal adoption occurring on July 4, 1776. However, New Jersey would adopt the state constitution and declare its independence from England 2 days before the Philadelphia Convention and the ringing of the Liberty Bell. On December 4, 1773, there was a marriage license issued to a John Ross and Elizabeth Grissom of Philadelphia. We know the Mrs. better by her married name, Betsy Ross. Burlington resident Robert Busby was the engineer of the John Bull in January 1834, when he eased the locomotive through the city at about 6 miles an hour. on the first visit by the steam engine. There are now two John Bulls, the original which resides in the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., and a copy made by the Pennsylvania Railroad, which is in the State Museum in Strasburg, Pennsylvania. The rails between milepost 20 in Mount Holly and Fort Dix had been lifted in 1984 after a 4-year abandonment. The 1/2 mile section between milepost 20 and Mill Street was removed in the spring of 1988. We will ride over a small portion of the former track bed between Mount Holly and Smithville and listen to one of the Pennsylvania self-propelled passenger cars, known as Doodlebugs, which once operated along this line. The only evidence remaining in Smithville is the old crossing signal box and road name sign. Station number 1451 was located at milepost 21.2. Many years ago, the H.B. Smith Company manufactured bicycles nearby and developed a bicycle railway so their employees could use this modern method of transportation to travel between Smithville and Mount Holly. The bicycle railway was, in actuality, a monorail system. More interestingly, though, Hezekiah Smith developed the first automobile here long before Henry Ford began to tinker on his own. The test run was an extreme success, to which old Hezekiah commented, "Put it in storage, it's 20 years ahead of its time." That was in 1879. Another footnote on the Smith Company concerns an employee named William S. Kelly. He invented something that millions of people use daily around the world. Transportation would be in a bind if it were not for the pneumatic tire. This through-plate overpass, which once carried double-tracked rails across Route 206 in Ewansville, was demolished in 1987. The demolition work forever squelched any hope that the old line might have had a chance of being reestablished. These slides show the demolition work in progress. This is the same location as it looks today. From where the bridge formerly crossed Route 206, all that remains today is this old passenger shelter. Located at milepost 22, Ewansville was known as station number 1452. The Vincenttown branch connected to the main line just east of the station. It ran for a distance of 2.7 miles to the south, basically parallel with US Route 206. We will visit Vincenttown next, and then return to the main line at Birmingham. The Stokes Company of Vincenttown uses former Pennsylvania Station number 1483 for their corporate headquarters. The structure had been moved about 150 feet from its original location, which was adjacent to the south branch of the Rancocas Creek. The end of track was just to the south of the station. For many years, the chief commodity shipped from here was marl. Birmingham Station, number 1453, was at milepost 23.4. The last passenger train between Camden and Pemberton passed this point in 1969, which was 17 years after passenger service ended to Toms River. Birmingham Station still exists today. In 1968, the station was relocated just west of Juliustown and sits on Arnie's Mount. It is presently an antique shop whose telegraph code once was BR. On March 25, 1977, Conrail train CB-20 derailed in Birmingham. This scene was taken from atop a nearby semaphore tower. Note the Erie Lackawanna RS-3 sitting adjacent to the station site. This is another view of that same wreck. Here is the same area today, 11 years later. The line divides into two on the east side of the station. The track bed on the left proceeds to North Pemberton, Fort Dix, New Egypt, and Hightstown. The track bed on the right ran through South Pemberton, Browns Mills, Whitings, Seaside, and Bay Head. Those rails were lifted in 1966. Oddly, the Pennsylvania's predecessors did not lay the rails between here and Whiting. The New Jersey Southern was interested in acquiring some business between Philadelphia and New York, but the Camden and Amboy prevented any westward expansion by the New Jersey Southern. So the New Jersey Southern opted to interchange with the Camden and Burlington County here in Birmingham, which was then known as Pemberton Junction, and laid the rails west from Whitings. In 1870, George Upton and Joseph Bradley acquired a mortgage to secure $375,000 in bonds, which would enable the Pemberton and New York Railroad Company to lay the 18 miles of track between Birmingham and Whiting. The Pemberton in New York was a subsidiary of the New Jersey Southern. The New Jersey Southern would later become the Central Railroad Company of New Jersey. Neither the Camden and Amboy nor the Camden and Burlington County expressed any interest in extending rails to the Jersey Shore at the time, and thusly endorsed the sale of bonds so that the New Jersey Southern could lay the track. The New Jersey Southern was financially a bit shaky and missed some bond payments. On March 31st, 1879, the Pemberton in New York was sold at a receiver's sale. For a mere $20,000, the Pennsylvania bought the line and renamed it to be the Pemberton and Seashore Railroad Company. This now gave the Pennsylvania a junction with both the New Jersey Southern and the Tuckerton Railroad in Whitings. This old station on the north side of Pemberton was known to the Pennsylvania as station number 1423 and to the Union Transportation as station number 75. This was the junction of both railroad lines. The Union Transportation Company operated north of here. On March 20th, 1857, the Burlington County Railway was authorized to lay rail 6.4 miles east from Mount Holly up to this point, which is 24.9 miles from Camden Station. 6 years later, the rails arrived in town. The first station was built in 1862, only to be destroyed by fire on November 1st, 1891. The ashes from that fire lie beneath the basement floor of the current station, which was built soon thereafter by John Rogers of Morristown, New Jersey, on the very same Jersey sandstone foundation. An event which would forever alter and improve railroad safety occurred here on April 11, 1872, as George Westinghouse's development of the triple valve for the air brake system underwent its very first test. Although the air brake worked well on trains, one problem plagued Mr. Westinghouse. If cars were uncoupled, the air brakes would be immediately drained of all air, and the brake system was then totally useless. The triple valve was designed to stop the train if the air system were to lose its pressure. As Camden and Amboy locomotive number 49 entered Pemberton late in the afternoon, two cars were deliberately uncoupled. They stopped as intended, proving the triple valve a success. In November 1946, the Pennsy cut 5 trains from the Camden to Pemberton schedule due to a coal strike, and 2 additional trains were terminated in 1950 in an effort to conserve more coal. There were several protests by local residents when the train stopped running. 12 years later, in 1962, the Pennsy cut 2 more trains due to the lack of passengers. The Pemberton station is currently owned by the Pemberton Township Municipal Utilities Authority. During the period of 1975 to 1977, this station was being restored with the use of township funding and volunteer labor. For the last 11 years, the station has remained in the same condition in which it had been left in 1977 when the township fathers cut off the funding. The weather and elements have attacked the building and will continue to do so unless something is done to continue the preservation effort. The station is included in both the New Jersey State and National Registers of Historic Places. One day late in 1976, we had broken through the basement floor, which was a thin concrete layer covering the ashes of the first station. As we sifted through the ashes, we discovered the remains of door hinges and other artifacts which would prove vital to the restoration project. We heard the Conrail freight approaching from the west. The train crew stopped on few occasions to admire the efforts of the restoration project. On this particular day, one member of the train crew pointed to the new Pennsylvania Railroad keystone which we had attached to the peak of the roof and asked, "Why in the hell did you put that up there? It ain't original." Well, I took one look at the locomotive, which was in a Conrail interim paint scheme, and answered his question with another question. Since when did the Erie Lackawanna run this far south? Conrail symbol freight CB20 with GP10 number 7570 is seen entering the Pemberton and Hightstown rails in front of Pemberton Station on April 4th, 1977. The Pemberton and Hightstown Railroad was incorporated on March 24th, 1864. In later years, it would be known as the Union Transportation Company, or the UT. Although the Pennsylvania was the parent company of the Pemberton and Hightstown and owned the rails, the UT would be operator of the line for most of its life, picking up freight either here in the Pemberton yard or at Fort Dix. Rail laying began here, heading north for Hornerstown in 1868. We will cover that event later in this program. The UT retired its last active steam engine when it arrived on July 15, 1959, after a run down from Allentown, New Jersey. The main line in Fort Dix basically ran east and west through Lewis Junction, while the Kincora branch, as we knew it in the 1960s, ran north and south. Station number 1421 in Lewistown was located at the intersection of Juliustown Road and Pemberton-Fort Dix Road. The Kincora branch began life on February 11, 1833, as a Delaware and Jobstown Rail or macadamized road company. It ran between Kincora near the Delaware River, through Columbus, passed here, and terminated in New Lisbon to the south. The cost to develop the line was a little less than $125,000 by 1838. We will cover that branch next. The branch was abandoned in November 1971, and the Penn Central had the rails lifted in October 1974. In April 1943, a troop train crashed into a truck where the crossing used to exist. The truck driver lost a leg in the wreck. During World War II, troop train movements were taxing the railroads to such a degree that all other traffic had to take siding, should any pose the most remote threat of interference with any troop train movement. In 1919, the 4.1 miles of track between Lewis and New Lisbon were abandoned, after fire destroyed the trestle spanning the Rancocas Creek in New Lisbon. That section of track had been used for just over 80 years. The track bed is no longer traceable where it used to run through the Fort Dix housing area. Station number 1420 in Juliustown closed in June 1938. Sometime after that, it was removed from the railhead to the center of town and is now a private dwelling. We are just over a mile from Lewis Junction. This old caboose sits abandoned just off of the track bed in Jobstown. It was part of an effort to operate on this section of track between Lewis and Columbus by a group known as Trolley Valhalla. They had leased the line for $100 a year from the Pennsylvania Railroad. Their efforts failed to win support, and this is what remains of their collection. We are 3.3 miles from Lewis, near the site where station number 1417 once stood. This section of rail that crosses the Columbus-Jobstown Road is the only rail which remains of the Kincora branch. The Columbus Freight Station is now a machine shop. Trains reaching this point would have traveled 4.3 miles from Kincora, 6.4 miles from Lewis, or 11.3 miles from New Lisbon. The passenger station is inside of a protective structure and is used for storage by the Lippincott Company. The station number was 1414. Wouldn't it be nice to see Pennsylvania K4 Pacifics or G5 10-wheelers running past here like they once did in the 1940s and 50s? Kincora Station was number 1324 to the Pennsylvania and located just 2.9 miles south of Bordentown. The Delaware and Jobstown lasted nearly 1 year and was abandoned. The first cars were pulled by mules. A special act of the New Jersey legislature on January 20th, 1834, changed the name to the Delaware and Atlantic Railroad. This action also authorized the extension of tracks into Barnegat and Tuckerton. Those tracks would never be laid as construction stopped upon reaching New Lisbon on December 31st, 1838. Train service would be available into either Barnegat or Tuckerton via a Pennsylvania connection with the Tuckerton Railroad at Whiting's. The future would hold more name changes as the Delaware and Atlantic would become the Columbus, Kincora, and Springfield in 1866, and then the Kincora, Columbus, and New Lisbon. On February 25th, 1915, this line was merged along with the Pemberton and Hightstown and the Philadelphia and Long Branch to become the Pennsylvania and Atlantic Railroad. Now that we are thoroughly confused, the Pennsylvania and Atlantic name would remain in place until the Penn Central merger was completed. Later in this program, we will visit New Lisbon, the other end of this branch, 15.6 miles to the south. As you can see, little, if anything, remains of Kincora other than this overgrown parking lot. We will now travel back to Fort Dix. On November 4th, 1975, Fort Dix received a replacement locomotive for their aging 80-tonner, which had suffered damage after derailing and running into a concrete abutment. These Super 8mm home movies show the action as it was 13 years ago. Since that time, Penn Central 7180, which pulled symbol freight CB-20, upon which U.S. Army 7926 arrived, has been scrapped. The 45-ton diesel is now seen driving off of the flat car upon which it rode across the country from Utah. This was a week after it was delivered to Fort Dix. The 7926 left post aboard a flatbed trailer on May 20th, 1982. Upon reaching the Conrail siding in Mount Holly, she was lifted onto a flat car for an unknown destination. This United States Army installation is named for Major General John Adams Dix, who, during his lifetime, served in many positions to include the presidency of the Union Pacific Railroad. The concrete passenger platform, the engine house, and the rail still exist today on post. The water crane is one of two which remain from the era when steam was king. Pennsylvania Freight Station number 1422 opened for service in 1917. It was located where weeds now grow.